day-to-day dedication is home building marketing, and I've done that on and off for 10 plus years.
What does that mean exactly? That sounds broad.
You can kind of, with very small risk, do a lot of different things and see kind of what takes.
I wonder if they should be paying you double.
And then the economy just took a dump. It rocked my world. I lost my job. And that was like, reality check 101.
Hi, and welcome to the Reiterate Show. Thanks for giving us a watch or a listen from wherever you are in the world. Our goal with this show is to introduce you to people who have gone through setbacks in their lives while they pursue happiness and fulfillment. Through these interviews and these conversations, hopefully you'll see that we are all capable of bouncing back and achieving greatness. Enjoy the conversation. Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. I had a really fun conversation today with Ryan Smart, who is a marketing manager for a home builder based out of Southern California. We talked a little bit about his career path over the last 15 years or so, but what we also hit on was how we will sometimes define ourselves by our job titles, by what we do or the things that we own, and what it's like, what happens to us if we lose that, and his experiences during the downturn of 2008. Enjoy! Well, today I am joined by a very good friend of mine, Ryan Smart. Thank you very much, Ryan, for being on the podcast with me. I look forward to diving into your story a little bit more and hearing about some of the experiences that you've had throughout your life. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm excited to share.
So Ryan, for just as a brief intro, tell me a little bit about you and what you've been working on, maybe some of your projects or where you're located. And
located permanently in Southern California, and we're going to go, but quarantined right here in St. George a little bit. And project-wise, I'm a creative type, I guess. So my day-to-day dedication is home building marketing, and I've done that on and off for 10 plus years, and consider myself like an amateur entrepreneur. So I have a couple online businesses. I do a good chunk of interior design on the side. So anything that deals with kind of creative and people, and I like to kind of, keep things interesting, maybe more interesting than I should, but.
And marketing, interior design also keep things looking good, right?
I feel that I'm my most happy when I'm surrounded by things in a very nice, put together environment. So that probably is a nice theme of my life.
Yeah, that's great. And home building marketing, what does that mean exactly? That sounds broad. What does your day-to-day look like, or what projects do you work on?
Yeah, it is broad, and there's kind of a front end side of it and a back end side of it. The front end side is builders try to figure out where the best places to build are. And so in the marketing realm, we dive into all the demographic data, who kind of lives around there based on home values, based on kind of average education levels, household incomes, what we think that population looks like, what kind of homes we want to build there, or can we afford to build there. And once we go through all of that exercise, then we build them. And then that portion of marketing turns into, what does the house look like? What does the design look like? Then we grand open, and then we drive the traffic or those people to these homes to purchase. And it's fairly dynamic because it changes by county, by region, by state. And so it's a little bit of, like I said, psychology and design and communication and marketing and kind of all the things I like kind of wrapped up into one.
So you, in the very beginning, you helped do the analysis of where homes should be built?
Yeah, so we have a land act team, and they will come with land deals. So much like the housing market, there's land for sale. And they'll say, hey, Ryan, this piece of land looks great. This is the size of the lot. Here's how much we can get it for. And this is the type of product we can build on that. And more or less, let's say these homes are going to be $500,000. Then I'll dig in and say, well, hey, the average household income in this area is this. This is what the family looks like. This is kind of what the full demographic data is. Sometimes it's an argument. Sometimes it's a great conversation. And, everyone wants the deals to happen. So, but if we've learned that if you force the wrong deal, even if it seems like a good deal, you're going to pay for it on the back end because you can't find buyers for that product type. So try to hedge that a little bit with some marketing.
That sounds to me like that should be two different jobs. I wonder if they should be paying you double. To me, it sounds like there should be like a data analysis guy on the front end doing that piece, but they've somehow roped a marketing guy into that, and I'm sure there's probably a much better fit than I'm imagining. Because when you say home building marketing, to me that sounds like, hey, we have a new development. How are we going to get buyers? How are we going to get this to market so that people then come and purchase the homes?
It's actually evolved in home building a long time. Probably 10 years ago when I got out of it, it was very traditional newspaper media, TV, radio, all of that. And I think as the world's gotten smarter, data is a lot more readily available. There's so much information on all of us that it is almost more of a science where we can kind of say, hey, you know what? This is exactly who we think is going to buy here. This is what they're going to buy. This is what they're going to want. And then we just build it for them.
I was watching a YouTube channel, Ryan Serhant. He's a New York City agent, big time guy. He has a really cool channel where he basically shows the coolest homes, and then, rich people call him to sell or buy homes like that. But I feel like that could be in your future. Maybe a Ryan Smart Vlogs type of YouTube channel. What do you think about that?
I can't stand to hear myself. So I feel like if I did, so long as I never watched it, we might have something going on. But yeah, that's that guy he's done well for himself.
Yeah, he's great. The content of his channel lends itself well for an audience because people like to see the flip or flop, the before and after.
We'll see where this road takes us, David.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be something exciting.
So you've been in the home building marketing world for 10 plus years. You must love it, but you also mentioned you've got some other side projects, interior design, e-commerce, online businesses. You are a busy man, and it sounds like you're probably working 80 hours a week. That's my guess. Is life pretty hectic for you?
I mean, the cool thing about probably when I came out of college, you just have that old school mentality of you take one job and that's how you define yourself in your career and you just work there forever. But the internet, social media just opened up the ability to do so much. And so you can kind of, with very small risk, do a lot of different things and see kind of what takes. And I think people have just such a broad range of skills and talents that it's almost a bummer that you have to dedicate all of your time and energy into one job. I'm a big believer that, why I'm doing my job that they're paying me for, I'm very dedicated to those hours. But after that, it'll ebb and flow, and I'll spend a bunch of hours on a weekend doing one thing and then a bunch of hours, maybe into design world. So it can be crazy. And I always say, why do I keep doing this to myself? And then when I'm bored, I know I keep doing this to myself because I think I am somewhat of a glutton for punishment, but I enjoy being busy.
Well, your creativity has to go somewhere. And it sounds like you've got more on your mind than can be contained with home building marketing. So you're finding a place for the rest of it.
Yeah, insomnia really gives you a lot of extra time.
So you said something funny. You said this old school mentality. You go to college and you take a job, and then that job defines you. Do you feel like when you were in college or when you first came out of college and you had those first few jobs, did you feel like you were being defined by what you did for a living?
Yeah, I think when you grow up, I looked at my dad, who was very successful. He just got a job and he worked there his entire career and just moved up. So in my mind, what I viewed a professional male father to be like was that you just put your head down and you work really hard. And I was super proud of my dad, and it kind of like he and his career were kind of one entity to me, And so for me, I just thought that's what you're going to do. You write down your little major and you say, I'm going to be marketing communications. And then I got a job with Home Builder, and then that was going to be me. So yeah, I think that's, without really any other perspective, that's just kind of the path I went down.
At some point, did you realize that and then choose to be defined by something else? Is there a point where that definition broke maybe? I mean, it sounds to me like you think differently now. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, so what happened is I got married in 2005 and started the job February 2006, and it was the end of what everyone would call the good year. I remember I worked at a bank in college, so everything was just balanced, the checkbook, making sure the vault had enough money and nothing was out of balance. It was very, very organized, regimented. I enjoyed it. Then I took this home building job, and man, things were going great. People were getting crazy bonuses. I remember as a marketing coordinator I didn't even know what a bonus really was, but they said, congratulations, Ryan, like, thanks for a great year, and here's $17,000. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, yeah, I thought that was like, that was great. And I kind of just was in this mentality of, you go to work, someone gives you, hey, Ryan, here's your assignment. And then you would accomplish it like a video game, like, boop, boop, boop. Now, next level, cool, now what, right? And then I thought everyone was looking out for my career too, like, okay, and then at this date, you will become this, and then this. And it was just this beautiful system, and everyone in the room was smarter than me, and they were all going to get me where I needed to go. And then the economy just took it down, right? And it rocked my world. And I remember the very first time I went into the office, and all these people gathered around me and said, hey, did you get an email? And I was like, what are you talking about? I logged onto my little laptop, and I didn't get an email, but about half my office did. And the first person came back with a pink slip. And I didn't even know what that was. And he was an older gentleman, and he was crying, and he got laid off. And so everyone who else got an email, they knew they were going to get laid off. And so I remember just taking off because I couldn't handle seeing the sadness. So I just left and kind of parked my car and had a little bit of what we call survivor's guilt. And then I will say for the next 2 years or about, no one knew what was going on during the big financial crisis. So, and I was young, and we were pregnant at the time, and it was about 2 or 3 years. We had 16 rounds of layoffs, I remember. And then I remember one day my boss coming to me. It was just down to her and I in marketing. And she came in tears in her eyes, and she said, hey, Ryan, we can't afford to keep you on the payroll. Can you consult for us? And you just say, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember vividly in my mind, I drove home in this new house that we'd purchased, and I sat against the wall, and my wife was not home yet. And I just sat against the wall with my head spinning. And she came upstairs, and she just saw my face. She said, what's wrong? I said, hey, I don't think I can provide anymore. I lost my job. And that was like, reality check 101.
So the financial crisis, we hear about it, we all remember it, but it had a massive personal consequence for you at that time. You were in the banking world.
I didn't understand what it meant, right? Like, that was kind of the thing, is I was just out of college, and I had kind of had a job before I think even a lot of my friends had a job. And I remember calling my dad and being like, Dad, hey, what do I do? So I fast forward a little bit. I consulted for Pulte for about, might have been close to a year. And then one of my coworkers who had worked at Pulte got a job elsewhere in the product development world for Home Depot. And he said, Ryan, I've got a job for you. if you're interested. And I was like, yes, right. At that time, there was no luxury of like, well, this really doesn't fit with what I had in mind. It was, oh, okay, I have a baby and a house. What do I do? So the job was farther away. We were living in a different part of California. And I was like, when we bought our house, by the way, financial crisis. So my house was 60% underwater, right? So what I bought it for, it was 60% less. So in numbers, I remember our first house was $400,000. And then the value of it was $190,000.
Oh my gosh.
And that's when I called my dad and I said, what do I do? And he said, I actually don't know. It's like, I've never dealt with this. And when you call your dad and your dad says, I don't know, you don't know.
There is no answer.
So I remember there is no answer and no one knew. And then this was the time that it felt like a movie scene. About 60% of our neighborhood was vacant. And the HOA was spray painting the lawn green, right, trying to sell them. And I'd heard the term short sale. I didn't know what it was. So I remember writing a letter to the bank first and telling the bank, hey, can you give me a forgiveness of principal? It made sense in my mind. If instead of me losing the home, let me write a letter. Just give me a reduction. You're still going to get a payment, albeit less, but then it's not going to be no payment, right? So I wrote a letter, didn't hear anything back. And I remember talking to, it was our VP of mortgage, this home builder. She had left and started to do real estate on her own. And she said, Ryan, you can't short sell your house until you stop making payments. And my brain couldn't wrap my mind around it. That felt illegal to me. That felt like a bad citizen. Like you shouldn't, like that is not honest, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to some people who told me, like, they looked at me like, are you really going to do that? And I was like, I don't know, but I have to take a job farther away. What do I do? And so this is what the real estate agent told me, who I had known and trusted. And I said, okay. And I remember that month, first of the month coming and me like not paying and feeling terrible, like feeling like a burden to society, feeling like a failure as a provider. This was just not what you did. And it felt terrible.
So a few minutes ago, we talked about how we will oftentimes feel defined by what we do, maybe what we have, and probably not so often about who we are. Unless we have a very strong sense of identity that we're purposefully working on over the years, it's easy to fall into being defined by who we are as our career or what we have, keeping up with the Joneses, that type of thing. During this year of 2008, all of that left. You essentially lost both of those big things in your life, right? Did you feel like you didn't know who you were? Did you feel like the definition of Ryan Smart was lost?
Felt like I did something wrong. That was like, why you saw certain people not lose their job, right? And then on one hand too, you also saw, like I felt like I had survived 16 layoffs. So for a while I was like, oh my gosh, like I am a valuable player. So I would say at the beginning, I kind of was super proud of myself. I was like, I'm gonna make it through this, right? I'm somebody the company wants. I remember right before that, I had won this prestigious President's Award and they took me on this trip and I kept thinking, and I would hear all these great accolades and I fed off that, right? I was somebody who I would say that is a bit of when they talk about the love languages, words of affirmation and love. Someone telling me, recognizing my hard work felt like, okay, that's how you know you're doing a good job. Mm-hmm. People see it, recognize it. When you did finally get laid off, I realized, well, I'm not as good as my boss. What did I do wrong? I remember going into a relatively new, it hired a VP of sales. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go in and just ask her for some feedback. Because I had heard stuff from other people, right? It was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're letting you go. You're so great. And I was like, I am so great. Why are they letting me go? And I remember her telling me, hey, Ryan, you're going to make it through this. I would look in the future at being a little bit more strategic. And it made me upset because I considered myself a strategic person.
Right.
So it was at first felt like, oh, you didn't do everything right. Like, we like you, you're a good employee, but when we got to put a dollar amount to it, your boss is better than you are. And that was the first time I kind of was like, oh, I did something wrong. Mm-hmm. And prior to that is you just, like I said, my whole life, I think media, everything, I was just planned on getting married, buying a house. Like, I was checking off things, that list pretty darn early and feeling really good about myself. And so losing it was tough. It was tough on the self-esteem.
What happened? Did you go into a state of despair for a couple of weeks? Did you consulted with the home builder for a time, but then somebody came along and offered you a different job? But during those couple of weeks, what was life like? What did your day look like when you had no job? You probably hadn't stopped making payments, and you were in this, I imagine, to be a kind of a state of non-action, or you don't know what step to take next. What was that like?
So my brain it was in a very weird state. To be honest, I think when people talk a little bit about kind of being numb, I just was like, what do I do? But my type of personality is I just want to fix something, and I want that pain to go away as fast as possible. So I remember the minute it happened, jumping online and sending my resume out all over the place. And I remember my parents giving me a check for $1,000 and just saying, you're going to make it through this. And that gesture, whatever was going on, I broke down. I cried. And I remember actually crying because it was kind of like this realization that people are understanding that this was difficult, right? And I don't like to, or especially back then, didn't like anyone to know. So I remember telling Erica, my wife, like, hey, just don't say anything to anybody. Like, I'm consulting, stuff going on. Like, I want to figure this out. I don't want anyone's sympathy. I don't want anyone to, look at me like they have a problem. And maybe that was unwise in the sense that you all kind of have to be willing to ask for help for some people. But my pride was like, I can fix this. So I just kind of turned on this mindset of like, I'm going to find something else. And one thing I think I have done well, not intentionally, but I've always networked. When I find someone who I find interesting and intelligent and kind of I can learn from, I just latch onto them and I keep those relationships. And I think in doing so, I look at every job I've had since, and it's because I've known somebody. Mm-hmm. And there's been this area of either trust. And what finally happened was an old coworker called me up and said, hey, Ryan, I got a job for you. And that was a huge relief. And it was a job I would have never in a million years taken. It was outside of my everything, like interests, mindset. I couldn't tell you that if someone was to tell me in my college, like, hey, you're going to take a job with a hardware, managing the hardware aisle of Home Depot, I would have said, well, I'd rather never do that. But, those times you do what you got to do.
So how many weeks or months was it between losing your job at Pulte to being offered and going down to, I think it was Atlanta, to interview and get that job lined up? How long in between those events?
So I was laid off in 2010, and I was fortunate enough to consult pretty much that whole time. And then I probably did that for 6 months. For probably 6 months of just consulting. And then that phone call was made, and then that initial job. So that was probably challenge number 2 is we moved, and that the silver lining is we moved to an area after home building to where we were much happier. It was much more coastal, closer to my family. And though the job wasn't ideal, it was much more of a lifestyle match. So we were really happy there. And I was working with a buddy. So though it wasn't ideal work, I enjoyed the people I was working with.
2010, you start consulting, but then you also move more over to the coast, closer to family, closer to where you, I think, grew up and had more people around, more of a fit for the family. And then what did you do in between the end of consulting and the beginning of the next job?
Consulted the whole time.
Oh. And when did the job offer come? What year and month was that?
I think it was like December 2010 was my last day, and I want to say that it was like January, February of the following year of 2011. So yeah, it was July 2009. I remember that actually because I took a trip to Portland. Remember we ran into each other. 2009, and that was between me finishing up consulting and starting this new job.
So you get the job offer with the hardware company. I assume you take it, and then what happened?
So from there, it was, overall it was good working with friends and in a place that we enjoyed. And then the company decided to move to Atlanta. And my mind shifted before to, at this point, you just kind of don't have the luxury of always following whatever path you want. And so we decided to move to Atlanta. And we moved there and really loved the city. It was a really cool city. I think we grew as a family, but we just realized, hey, this isn't where we want to raise our family. And I think that's really where my mind shifted, where I realized, hey, what is the old kind of real estate cliche of location, location, location? We decided we just didn't want to be there. That's not where you honestly could say, hey, Ryan, I'm going to give you $1 million salary and you can live like a king. And if you know me really well, that's very enticing to me. The idea of comfort and nice home and luxury, like that sounds fantastic. And I would tell you 100% confidence, no thank you. We moved back home to California, and it was from that job actually that I had moved with a hardware company. One of the girls who I'd worked with had worked for another company back in Orange County, and she reached out and she said, hey, I don't know if you're interested, but there's a job, back here in Orange County. And I said, yes. What am I doing? Am I licking tables? Am I taking out the trash? What just get me out of here? And we did. And really that was kind of where I feel like we came back and it felt like, okay, I'm home. And the whole idea of this big home and kind of luxurious living, and you kind of just saw your parents. I think a lot of us saw our parents just kind of naturally move up and progress. And I realized that just doesn't going to happen to everybody. And where I want to be is I want to be with my family in an area surrounded with people who I want to be around. And that was back in California.
So you finally make it back home. And it's been a number of years since this experience. What do you think? What are the takeaways? What have you learned from those couple years of crisis?
It's like every cliche that you ever hear actually has context behind it. And what I learned, number one, is everything is temporary. Like there is no guarantee for anything. So if what is making you happy is not in place, you're always going to be chasing something that is not up for grabs. So that was really a big one. While I was like, I can lose my job anytime. I can lose my house anytime. So I think there's just a level of gratitude. I think my thoughts oftentimes are like, I'm grateful to have a job in general. And I think for a long time you grow up in your career and you're kind of frustrated. You're not where you want to be. Though those times happen, I also am just like, listen, I know what it's like to just not have anything. So to have kind of your basic shelter, food, family has been something I try not to take.
And is that different from 10 years ago? Do you think that concept or that mindset has grown?
I don't think I would have ever realized that. I think I would have had this kind of sense of entitlement. I just thought you were kind of owed a job. You go to college and you would get a job, and that you naturally I should have a house, and I should grow my career, and I should end up being wealthy, and I should have a happy marriage. Like that was just part of kind of the reward of you putting in the effort. And I don't think I would have realized that had it not been like actually stripped away. And I realized, oh no, you know what? I got to make this happen, and I got to define what that looks like for me.
Define what looks like.
What happiness looks like, what success looks like.
How did you used to define it?
I think it was very mature. It was outward. It was what you kind of always thought of. For me, I thought what success would be is you have this kind of happy marriage, and you would have this big home, and you would just have all of these friends, and you would naturally just be this executive in this career where, money was never an issue, and you were traveling. And I think it was all the really temporal things that are easy to mark off and say, oh, that's what success looks like, right? Like it is tangible. You would see these people, those Ryan whatever hearts of the world selling luxury homes, and you're like, oh. And I don't think my concept was ever like yacht, jet, but it was for sure like, yeah, I'm going to be comfortable, and money shouldn't be an issue, and I should be this VP of marketing or CMO. Like it just should be handed to me after X amount of years.
So that sounds pretty entitled. As a straight white male, that could be definitely a cliche for people like us to say. Now, how do you define it? What has changed since then?
In general, I think I'm just very aware of all of that. A lot has changed via the media. I never even realized, or maybe had a belief system in this kind of culture of like white privilege, right? Like it was just something I was like, well, okay, that doesn't fully exist. I work hard. If anyone works hard, right, that's just the deal. The difference between me and someone else is I choose to work hard, and I went and got an education, and I did all of the right things. And I think maybe that is one of the lessons, is that you can do all of the right things, and the typical success that you want to define may not happen ever, right? That you can fail multiple times. And I thought that the world would just right itself for me because I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. Another thing I learned too is that it's not always fair. As you grow in business or you're young, I think I mentioned before, is that I would see all these executives or people who were much successful, and I just thought, oh, they know how to do it, right? I'm just waiting to learn from them. And you see things in business that aren't always right. The people are kind of winging it, but everyone's just making the best decision with the information they have. And it's not always the best decision. It may not always be honest. And that doesn't mean that I just am this passion for justice. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is not always going to happen that way. Mm-hmm. I think that was kind of a disappointment, and one where I had to learn hey, I have to be okay with my work, and I have to make sure that I'm honest with the way I work, and that it may not mean the success I want. I mean, if I'm being very candid, and you and I have had these conversations before, I'm nowhere where I thought I'd be from a success, maybe financial title standpoint. And while I do think that does still give me a little bit of drive, not for the title, but just to maybe enjoy life the way I want or had planned. But I'm very, very content because of what I do feel I have. I know is more important.
So first of all, you are being incredibly honest. I think that is probably a testament to how self-aware you are, how much you've probably worked through your own thoughts and feelings. So thanks for being, open. I don't think that everyone could sit down and say some of these things, or describe what it's like to lose your home and not have answers and be in a confusing situation like you were. How has your definition of success changed today? How do you define yourself today?
Deep down, I have an ideal success, right? That is driven from, there's still that element of seeing successful people, which meaning people who have a higher role, better pay, nicer home. That still drives me. I still want those things. There is, and call it, everyone has a different name for it, but this inner peace and confidence that says, if nothing changes, right? If I keep on this path that I am now, I'm happy. And that is kind of how I think things changed. I also think that because of the recession, I would have never even thought to venture out in some of the side business I've had because my brain wouldn't have gone there, right? The other thing I realized was that jobs aren't secure. No one is looking out for you except for yourself. You have people who love you and care about you and help you, but no one wakes up in the morning and says, how are we going to get Ryan to the next level today, right? And I don't know why, as a young person, like I said, I thought that was gonna happen. I also I think it's made me a little bit better of a boss to look at those people and say, hey, what did I not have that I can give? How do I take my employees and make sure I am looking out for them, making sure I share with them, some of the things that I've learned. So I think it changed me into a new person that I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I not had it all stripped away, because there's no reason to change if nothing changes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. Sometimes they say a roadblock. I guess we're learning how to sidestep around roadblocks and what other path is there. And if you don't get knocked off the path, you might not have ever known there were the 3 paths to your left or the 4 paths to your right that you have since been able to find. If you could go back to 2006, coming out of college, and you could sit down with baby college graduate Ryan at that time, would you give him any advice that you know today that would be beneficial for him to know way back when?
Outside of exercising more, that would have been helpful back 20 years ago. But really, I think I would have told myself, and I remember actually having a younger person call me up and saying, hey, Ryan, I'm going to college. What advice can you give? And I said, do what you love to do. And I went about college thinking, okay, what job should I take that's going to best provide for my family? It was in line with my interests. Obviously, I wasn't going to be a mathematician because I sucked at that. But I went and I just kind of took this job that was at a career fair. And I kind of always thought, put off the stuff you kind of love not intentionally, but people would be like, oh my gosh, don't chase your passions. That can be irresponsible, right? You always see those people who love music and like, there's no career in that. And I think I would have told myself, hey, you know what? Like, you're going to start over, go do something you absolutely love doing. And, don't be ashamed of following that path. And I would have definitely done that, I think, instead of just taking a job.
When I was in high school, I had a conversation with my dad, and it was a little bit of a joke, but they would never buy me drums. And I always wanted a drum set. And living in suburban Sacramento, where do you put a drum set? But they wouldn't do it. And this was 1999, and eBay was brand new. So I bought a drum set off eBay where I put cash in an envelope and I sent it down to wherever the guy was. And then 3 weeks later, these drum sets appeared on my porch. So the running joke in my family was, I was going to be a rock star. I knew I wasn't, but it was just fun to tease my parents. So at some point, my dad and I were joking around, and he said something like, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to be a drummer in a band, of course. And he's like, oh, that's stupid. I was like, Dad, haven't you ever heard of following your passion? And he said, David, haven't you ever heard of putting food on your family's table? And I thought, no, I actually had never thought about that. But over the years, I have become so enthralled with the amount of ways that people make a living in this world. It's almost infinite number of ways that people can provide a living for themselves if they are motivated, if they are creative. And what you said is something that I think, being on this side, of a short, 10, 12 career so far, with plenty more ahead of us to go. But it's so true. Doing what you have a true interest in, I'm so convinced that you could find a way to make a living in almost anything. Your advice rings true for me as well.
It's all these talents and skill set, right? And being a drummer doesn't necessarily mean like that's your only talent. You have brains of a drummer, that creativity, that artistry, whatever it is. Like, everyone comes down or has developed this really unique skill set. Why would you go try to make a living doing something that you're not that great at, right? Unless you had this passion for it, which in my mind still means that's some skill set. And that was me. I was so afraid because I looked at my dad, and my dad couldn't be the polar opposite of me. But I just thought, this is how you be a dad, right? Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to hate me because I don't know anything about football. Luckily, I ended up with 3 daughters. I don't know anything about ballet, but I'm a nice in-between right there. But it really just does not make sense. I'm like, I'm a creative, extrovert personality. There's got to be a better job for me out here. Hardware.
Yeah. And you found it. And luckily, your wife knows a little bit about ballet as a semi-pro ballerina. Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was fun to talk to you and hear your insights on your life, your last 15 years. Are you reading any books lately? Do you have any recommendations for me?
From a business standpoint, I did read the recent book called Propeller, which was a quick read, but it was really good. And it kind of talks about just business success and the main thesis is see it, own it, solve it, do it. It was asked us to read by our CEO, and I was like, oh gosh, this seems like such a salesy book. But like any of those sales books, they come out with really, really interesting ways to look at business and life and solve problems. And that, I would say, definitely go read that one. It's called Propeller. I'm forgetting who the author is, but I would recommend that. And it just talks about the same thing. There's a kind of staying above the line and going below the line. And it's kind of, are you someone who blames the situation? Or are you someone who kind of keeps above the line and solve the problem? And it's good.
Propeller, accelerating change by getting accountability right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and then did you have a fiction recommendation you've been reading?
Little Fires Everywhere. And that was a fantastic book in that it kind of takes two very polar opposite personality types and lives and really talks about how really you may resonate with either side, but there are problems going on either direction. And having maybe a spouse or a friend read it, it's a good conversation of who you think is right and wrong and why. And I'm just a big kind of fan of like psychological why behind why people act the way they do. That was an excellent read.
Perfect. I'll check them out. Hey, if somebody who's listening wants to reach out, has a question about marketing, home building marketing, is there somewhere someone can reach out and get in touch with you?
You can email me. My personal email is D as in David. You like that name. D as in David.ryansmart@gmail.com. And I love to talk all things marketing, design, creativity. So I'm always up for a good conversation about that.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was actually a lot of fun reminiscing about my failures. Makes me feel good about myself. Thank you.